الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا people. We are here today with an esteemed guest. We're going to bring him on just shortly. Let me just give you a little introduction to uh, today's guest. We're gonna. It's a. It's an important yet casual conversation and dialogue on crucial matters. It's free flowing, people. Our guest is an erudite imam, all the way from Illinois, US, people. Imam Mazhar. Allahu Akbar. Those of you that can just see this is, I've just put a photograph of the Imam right there. There he is. Look at that gleaming photograph. The Noor you can see, people. Allah, Allah. And the man, the myth himself right here. Allahu Akbar.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me, Mufti, and assalamu alaikum to the viewers.
Right, this is Imam Mazhar right here. Imam Mazhar. You know what it is we've got a friend. We've got a friend, Mazhar as well, Maz. So I'm so used to just saying Maz all the time. I'll be actually having him on tomorrow night. He's also a very keen an ustad, really, in his own right. Very keen student of knowledge, quite mischievous in other ways as well. I'm just moving some of this. People, we is live. Yes, alright. Yes, we are. That's my keyboard. Don't worry, people. This is not no hanky panky computer. This is my this one professional. This one for work. So people will be. You can post in questions as you please. There is the Facebook chat is live as well today. I can see it. It's coming in. Whilst this is going on, I'm just gonna share this to my page. Wrong phone. Right, I'm just going to share this to my page, and I'll share it to Imam Mazhar's page as well. I keep saying Mazhar. There's a very famous, legendary Maliki scholar called Mazhari, Imam Mazhari. I don't know if you've heard of him. Have you heard of him, Imam Sir?
No, I've never heard of him.
यार क्या शर्मिंदा करते हैं आप.
You're into the Maliki fiqh, mashallah, tabarak.
So, people, what software is being used? Alright, can you see the chats? Can you see that, people? That is what I'm talking about. Right, those of you, whilst you're just tuning in, I'm just going to be sharing this. And here it is. Sharing it now. Share, right post. Alright. Crucial conversations. Alright. With Imam Mazhar. Okay. Now this is brought up the other Imam Mazhar US. Sorry, people, just almost with you. Conversation. Oh, that's my feedback there. Now, have you shared it to or I can share it to your page if you like, or are you sharing it to your page?
I can share it later on if it's going to be up.
Sure. No, absolutely fine.
Or you can share it for me.
I'll share it right now. Share to a page, and then I'll just type. No, actually I can't do it right now. We'll have to do it later on. It's not allowing me to pick up your page for some reason. You've probably got me on block. That's why.
No.
It's like
I just can't stand my purple jubba, man. I told you.
People, this, as you can see, there it is. On a friend's timeline in a group. Share to fit. Nah. Right, we'll have to do it later on, that part. Right, so folks, as you can see, this software right there, you can see the chat section. Um, Without the volume, I'm not sure if you saw it, Imam Saab, on your Facebook page.
I didn't open my
Right,
Facebook
okay,
page.
no problem. No,
Just
no, that's
focusing
cool.
on your Noor, Sheikh.
Allah, Allah. As you can see, look at that purple theme coming right through, people. And those of you looking at my asking about the software, you think I don't know this stuff, people? This is technology that's going down here. Proper, exactly. Mindtrap, people. Welcome to the Mindtrap. Vamos a empezar. Let us begin. So, people, if you want to post some questions, you can do. If you want to, we'll try and take in certain questions as well. But I did want to introduce you all to this young, thriving imam that we've got right here. Let me just bring him right up. And just to tell us a bit about yourself, Sheikh, a bit about where you're at, where you're from, what you're currently doing, just
Sure,
so some of our viewers can know a bit about you.
for sure, for sure. My name is Mazhar Mahmood, born and raised in Toronto, Canada.
Wow, this sounds like one of those hostage videos that we're about.
Oh man, you got me hostage, and I I haven't come out in live at this level, so Jazakallah khairan. Uh, I did my schooling and everything in Toronto, Canada. I did my primary Islamic studies, my Hifdh al-Quran, the Tajweed al-Quran here as well, under my father in Canada. And then I went to South Africa, Darul Uloom Zakaria, for higher studies. After returning, I did some, formal Imam educations or like practical education in the US. I served in Canada. Now I'm
What
serving.
what's practical education?
So basically, training under an imam who's actually doing good work in his community before actually stepping into any community on my own, if you know what I'm saying. So I sort of referred to certain local imams in Toronto for that, and certain imams in the US. They helped me out a bit, introduced me to common challenges, how to, how to basically talk to the youth, not chase them away and whatnot, uh, which is unfortunately the situation many a times.
The
And
playing the chasing games.
yeah, and then now I'm between Canada and the US. I work as a program manager and a director of religious affairs in Peoria, and I work with newcomers in to Canada in BC, which is British Columbia, the
You're currently based in Canada.
So I work in the US, but right now I'm in quarantine in Canada in my Toronto home because of the whole coronavirus. I'm in quarantine.
I see. Okay, but just like in the sense that the whole country is in lockdown. In that sense.
No, no, Mufti. Basically, I had to drive to cross the border from America or to Canada. So basically, anybody coming into the country, either via air or car,
Yeah.
they basically have to be on a lockdown for 14 strict days at the place that they're going to go. So right now, I'm in lockdown in my family's home, or quarantine, I should say, in my family's home in Toronto because of that stipulated law by the government.
Right. So just a moment. I'm just double checking with people if the audio is problematic. Some people were saying the audio is there's some problems with it. I'm just one moment. Sorry about this, Imam Saab. Just checking.
No worries. Yeah, it's too formal. You calling me Imam Saab, man.
नहीं यार चलता है यार चलता है. So it's just checking guest Skype properties. This people. I'm just acting like I'm some kind of like I know what I'm talking about. I'm doing here. I've got no idea what I'm actually doing. uh, so Mm-hmm. Hello, hello. So it's got my mic on. Oh, my mic is actually very low. Oh, right, people. Sorry, my mic is actually very low. Uh, now I've just actually put this up.
You're pretty blurred out now. Like I can't see you.
Oh, right. That will fix up. That'll
Okay.
pick up. Yeah. So, people, there may be some teething issues. That is actually part of the purpose behind me doing all these kind of runs is to go through the teething issues and to kind of be able to fix the problems. Mufti, you're echoing. Damn, I'm echoing. Oh, right. Why is that? It must be picking up. What if what if I block that now and just focus on my I feel like I'm kind of one of those super hackers, but really I'm just totally confused and lost. Am I still like? Let me check. Is it any better, people? Any better? Any better? Just drop me a message.
I don't know if it's just for the viewers. I can hear you fine on my side.
All right, people, can you hear me? Is it perfect? Somebody's saying it's perfect. Right, Allahu Akbar. People, you sound perfect. Shukran, yaar. Ye to, this is this is your inner perfection that you're projecting out. Allah. Both of you should use headphones. I know we should, but ab main gali dunga. This thing wasn't. Mine weren't working. His weren't working. So that's another teething issue that we gotta work on. But cool, Imam Sahab, we is live. So right now you're in Canada, but you're still generally following the quarantine. You're working in Illinois, US.
Yep. I'm working in Illinois. Even now, I'm working remotely while being in quarantine here.
Somebody just said Mufti's a boomer. We'll cut him some slack. Shukran, yeah. Shukran. We can't all be generation Z. Like 15 years old. But so Imam Sahab, talk to us,
Mufti,
man.
what's up?
What's going down in the States, man? What's the status quo? There's a lot of questions I've got as well and things I'd like to discuss, but currently, first of all, beginning with this crisis, what's it like on the ground over there, man? What's going down?
Yeah, so in terms of my community, everyone's on lockdown. People are laid off of work. Masajid are closed, but once again, some people are causing problems, both in Canada and the US, with regards to secretly opening or keeping the masajid open. And unfortunately, that's taken a toll on the general public.
They're not really liking that. Are still open?
Well, some masjids are, basically secretly keeping themselves open after, having warnings from MPs. A lot of masajid, for some reason, they just can't handle the rules, So they open up secretly. I know there was a big news article here in Canada about one masjid being forcefully open against their imam's wish. And they were actually taking fatwa from New Delhi, like I think some hardcore tablighi, markas with regards to keeping their masajid open. And I don't know, it's just creating a bad image of Islam in that sector. Our masjid in Peoria, it's been shut down for a while now. But yeah, I hear the numbers in America are rising in terms of the whole coronavirus scene. I think they're beating China in terms of how they're rising.
Wow.
And I could have figured that out because a lot of these Americans, they're not taking these rules seriously. They're just, they close them off from the malls, then they're chilling at the super centers. they closed them off from restaurants, so they're by takeout areas. So I just don't know what's going on. Yeah,
Hasn't
that's the scene.
hasn't Trump announced that he wants everything kind of up and running? He wants everything.
To be honest, he did announce that. People laughed at it. It is laughable. I don't think that's realistically going to happen because of the rising numbers. So I'm sort of baffled by that whole scene.
I see.
Yeah. Uh, well, in local news, a lot of the ulama groups I'm on, they're fighting about praying Dhuhr or Jumu'ah. Should you pray Dhuhr at home or should you pray Jumu'ah?
Just one thing before I wanted to go on to this the Muslim kind of reaction stroke response, but just before that, this hydroxychloroquine drug, has that come into circulation in the States?
I don't believe so. No, not as yet.
Okay, cool. Now, this thing that you're saying, Imam Saab, I mean, I'm seeing things, I'm not really in a lot of...
Well, it's taking a Mufti, sorry, before I forget, it's actually taking a toll. A lot of the, youth Muslim leaders who are connected with imams, they're sort of like bashing the UK imams where you're from, for their response. And now they're actually going on to the local imams. So
when you're saying bashing, as in, what is it
on their responses, like, we should still keep the masjids open for Jumu'ah, and we can at least have, like, for example, in Canada, there was this mandate by the government that you can congregate under 50 in an area. So people are like, well, we can, play with those rules and congregate. But I believe that was more for, social services aspects, if I'm correct. But there is this constant back and forth in certain ulama groups that I see, them bickering about praying Dhuhr or Jumu'ah and whatnot, when, different different ulama organizations have already clarified the matter. But I don't know if it's just for the sake of bickering or if it's for the sake of ego or if it's just for academic talk. If it's for academic talk, I understand. But if it's for the sake of bickering, then that's actually taking a negative toll on the young population and young scholars, to be honest, as well. We're like, what's going on?
When you said that a lot of imams are being criticized here by people from over there, what is it that they were criticizing?
So I can open up the post of that exact youth leader. I believe it was with regards to keeping masajid open by certain segments of, the Deobandi or the Barelvi community there, or the arguing that was taking place in between them, and it was being publicized. Wallahu a'lam, I'm not sure exactly, but I saw a lengthy post by one of the youth leaders here, one of the university MSA presidents or whatever, who's actually known among his community.
Are you saying that the UK posts were what I mean? Sorry, the American posts, they were what were the people here, they're saying we should leave the masjids open or we shouldn't? What are you finding? Because I'm a bit confused on the angle that
they were saying we should be leaving the masjids open despite
right,
quarantine.
Okay, I see.
So that was taking that was like literally pissing some people off,
Of course. I mean, is that what the imams or people in the States are doing? They're saying we should leave the masjids open.
So it depends it depends which circle you're talking to, but I'm saying the majority of the imams in our region, they're rational in this regard. Even like those who are considered hardcore have sort of calmed down, and when the lockdown was announced, they basically just send out emails to their communities and messages that we're going to shut down masajid, prayers at home.
All right, those of you just tuning in on Facebook, I see your comments right here. Claire, Robin, Serlik, Terran, Henna, ahlan wa sahlan bikum, all of you. And likewise on YouTube, you can post any decent comments. Avoid any unnecessary kind of trolling of one another as well, please. Otherwise, you will be blocked. Blocked, people. Right. So, okay, we're just speaking about this coronavirus situation and the States and the UK.
But it's actually sad, Mufti, that these some of the senior scholars, they actually hate to see the young ones or the young graduates going against their hardcore way of preaching or hardcore opinions that don't make sense, and then you're actually deemed a misguidance, for society. How do young scholars, how should they deal with that? It's such a turnoff coming from people who actually taught you, or actually, I should say loved you once upon a time.
I mean, is this, if you don't mind me asking, something you're personally experiencing because of?
I'm actually personally experiencing. I know, a few weeks back you spoke about that whole dream with regards to the coronavirus in your
Exactly.
Mufti Masala segment. Yeah, I don't know any other scholar who spoke about that personally. I wrote an article about it, not taking his name, and I was actually bashed for it by certain scholars. I think scholarship is becoming more emotional than rational. It's really sad to see. Like, one person actually responded to my article, which I literally dissected this whole situation academically. Somebody responded by saying that your article or your conclusion goes against the Quran. In the Quran, Allah has mentioned that a specific entity could be a punishment, or it could be, mercy. I actually couldn't recall any verse in that regard. Well, basically in the context of, speaking about the whole coronavirus situation, I said, "Ituni bi kitabillah," bring me that verse. I was baffled today, Mufti, wallah, in full honesty, I was baffled that people are ready to make iftira ala kalamillah to this for the sake of saving the behinds of their sheikhs.
Of course.
It's sad. And then I actually, put a message out in that specific group saying that, Mashayikh, let this be a lesson for one and all. This is the extent that we could go to in relation to blind reverence and irrational cultism. I actually wrote that down. And until now, this person hasn't come up with an adequate response.
I mean, is this then causing a kind of backlash for the work you're doing? Is it kind of causing difficulties as your position as an imam? Is it potentially even compromising? Because I know when you're part of a tradition, when you're part of a particular group, there's an infrastructure in place. Like, so for example, as an imam, you may go as a khatib to a particular masjid, you may go to deliver a speech, have classes.
For sure. So you're barred out of many of the circles that you were welcomed in once upon a time because of this, BS, so to speak. Another of my, among my seniors, I should just leave it to that, said, "You're going against this entire fraternity and you're disrespecting a certain, I don't want to mention the cult, or, you're disrespecting your whole basically legacy of scholarship." And I was so turned down by that. People are not ready to tolerate, differences in opinion. Forget about differences in opinion. People are not ready to tolerate the truth. That's what's happening, Mufti. Even when this whole Asrar Rashid thing came out, when you made those whole, memes and whatnot about, the poison, I was shocked at the scholarship in my circle actually condoning that, right? Praising it by bringing a hadith like the hadith of Khalid and using it to justify it. I think, Jazahumullahu khairan, my mentors, they gave me a chance to put an article up against that as well on their platforms. And you're the only other scholar who I heard speaking about this. People are bashing their heads with regards to this whole coronavirus issue. But in my opinion, that is a bigger virus in terms of the whole spirituality and the deen. The youth are actually feeding off of this type of BS. If you're saying this is the truth. Now, I actually wrote in that article, by the way, that if certain preachers consume poison and the youth follow them in their path and lives are taken, such preachers should be taken to task.
Of course.
At a legal level.
It's a huge...
Nobody spoke about it. Nobody spoke about it like that. People are bashing their heads with regards to petty masail, rulings about the whole coronavirus, but nobody speaks about this, this type of stuff.
I'm seeing a lot of... I don't know if you're seeing this.
Sorry, before we move on, how did you deal with, for example, the change that I know I asked you earlier, the whole, we all go through change the more we learn. How did your teachers deal with that,
Right.
so to speak? The reason why I'm saying teachers is because I'm going through something similar of that sort, where sort of the teachers are actually the ones bashing me for the good.
I understand. I mean, in my sense, it may have been slightly different. You see, I had a slightly diverse learning. So I studied initially in Damascus in Syria. Then I studied in Pakistan, in Islamabad. I studied in Karachi, Deobandi Madaris. I also had a diversity of teachers, Brailwi teachers, Deobandi Madrasa as well. I even did something in an Ahl Hadith. That said, the bulk of my Pakistan madrasa, the whole Alamiya and the Mufti course, was in a Deobandi madrasa. But when I returned here, you see, because you have to remember, I came back, we're talking around 2005. Things like social media weren't really up and running in that sense. We never really had a close bond. Like, I never had, apart from maybe if somebody said something, I might say, extend my salams, extend my wishes to the asatidha, but we weren't really in touch in the sense that like the sheikhs are calling me, asking me, what are you up to, stuff like this. We never had that kind of bond. Now,
and now they're in our WhatsApp groups.
But now, exactly, I mean, so that kind of gave me a sense of freedom in that sense. But that said, to be honest, even when people have told me that, look, let's say these asatidha, somebody's spoken to these asatidha about you, that these are your kind of opinions, these are the kind of things that you believe in, that you do and stuff like this. What are your thoughts about it? It doesn't bother me if they are going to be disappointed in me. It doesn't bother me if they're going to think, oh my God, gumrah ho gaya hai, he's gone astray, he's dal mudil, he fasik ban gaya hai, दाढ़ी मनवाता है या चलो जो कुछ भी दाढ़ी काटता है, जो कुछ भी करता है, cuts his, trims his beard, he wears these kinds. I have gone beyond that, you see, and plus I know you're still much younger than me. During these years there was a time where I was very concerned about the opinions of others, and maybe it's an age thing, a maturity thing, maybe it's just experience, maybe you just go through so much of it. It doesn't bother me. Like, I think, joke, like, and what? Like, if you think about, if you want to maintain links. If you don't. It's not at the end of the... I tell you, we had a link up here, a Jamia Binoria kind of link up after just last year. The Mufti Naeem Saab's son, Shaykh Farhan, kind of came over and he specifically did ask me, I want you to kind of attend, and he's definitely, by now they're very familiar, they've heard of what I'm up to, my kind of views, my kind of niche audience or whatever it is, my platforms, and he insisted that I come, and he was very kind of understanding, chilled out. We even did a small kind of interview thing. He asked me to do it with him. And now, as opposed to the other people. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that, look, even if you, I'm just saying, I know people like Sheikh Farhan and Mufti Naim are quite open-minded compared to other people, but my point is, even, you see, if you persevere on what you have to do,
Mm-hmm.
people will come round anyway when the time comes.
For sure.
People,
For sure.
and my point was, even if they don't, so what? Like, I'm not going to. I was thinking about this, Imam Saab. I tell you that I was thinking that imagine
Yeah,
the
you're too
people.
formal, man. I'm like your younger brother. Don't call me Imam Sahib,
Oh
man.
yeah, you're at the end of the day. Look, I was thinking about this. I've now that I've started this kind of podcast thing. I sent some
Yeah.
messages to some people as well that do normally kind of chat with me, imams, things like this, and I said, look, by the way, let me know if you guys want to kind of jump on. We'll have discussions. We'll do this. And a few of them said, they'd love to chat with me generally. They want to Skype me generally or chat to me. But they said there's no way they could do something in public because it would affect them. Yeah, it would kind of their following, or not their following. Not that they've got a huge following or anything. They haven't. But in the sense that their associations, the local imams would, that fraternity would clamp down on them, and they're too frightened and they can't take the slack. And I was just thinking, I mean, I said to them, that's cool, that's no problem. I mean, there's so many people I've got to kind of speak to. I was just saying it as a gesture. But my point is,
Sure.
what I was thinking about was, look at this time, this global calamity, and there's many people dying, yeah,
Yeah.
or they're becoming seriously ill and on the verge of death. Now imagine, la samahallah, khuda na khasta, people are to die. Would you put yourself at that position if that is you, about to now, maybe your time in this world is limited? How would you feel that you spent a life cowed in and kind of in cowardice, not even being able to express yourself because you were worried about the opinions of others who truly do not even care about you?
Sure.
Like
100%.
like it would be one of the greatest regrets
Yeah.
in life to have thought that, what,
You're basically trying to live under somebody else's shadow.
well, absolutely. And do you know something? There have been studies. I believe it was in Australia, there was a study done on people in palliative care who were terminally ill. They had very few weeks and months left to live. And somebody had done a study of several of these people, and the top 5 greatest regrets, they kind of factored them into the top 5, what these people regretted. And number 1, what made it to number 1 in this list of people who are now at face to face with a certain death within weeks due to some illness, number 1, people, wallahi, was that they regretted not living a life true to themselves.
Wow.
Now when they've reached this stage, this final curtain, they thought that, that this is nothing regardless of faith. They thought that if only I lived a life more true to myself. I spent my life so worried about what people are going to think about me that I never even got to live it, and now it's too late. And I think, wallahi, I commend you, and I encourage you to, carry on with, even if it means, in this way that you're kind of facing criticism by your fraternity, kind of trying to zero in on you, place pressure, on you and things like this. I would say, as Allah says, say we have faith, قُولُوا آمَنْتُ بِاللَّهِ ثُمَّ اسْتَقِيمُوا, have iman, like istiqamah, perseverance, because these people, even if you have their kind of, let's say, support, what does that actually mean? What does it mean in the real world?
But subhanallah, what the problem is, well, it hasn't happened to me as of yet. It is happening at a certain level. They basically bar you off from people who affiliate with you, people who connect with you. People, say it's a Deobandi circle. They say, well, this person goes against Deobandi opinions. Actually, very funny, Mufti. I was having a talk with one of the young scholars from England, one of my friends who lives near, I think, where you live somewhere. He also married into a Canadian family, so he's in Canada. I was talking to him and saying that what's the beef that people have with Mufti Abu Layth? Is it his what is considered to be tafarrudat, for example, the issue of the second coming, right? That's an example.
Just to be sure,
And
we're
by the way,
spelling that
I'll sort of branch
COMING.
off. I'll sort of branch off on that note, Mufti. It's so sad how people have thrown statements of kufr in that regard,
Of course, of
and
course.
statements. And then I told him, what if they were to do research about some of their very own, our very own Deobandi scholars, like say Maulana Ubaidullah Sindi,
Yeah,
who held that
exactly.
opinion. I actually, by the way, read his entire book,
So
to
have
be
I.
honest. Yeah. Uh, why do they not pick on Maulana Ubaidullah Sindi, and why do they pick on, say, Mufti Abu Layth? So basically, what we came down to was it's the way Mufti Abu Layth looks. If he looked like if he looked like Maulana Ubaidullah Sindi, then uh, they would not be able to criticize him or whatever. But speaking about this whole takfir phenomena, I remember as a young student coming back
And
from South
just for
Africa.
people who aren't familiar, takfir means declaring somebody a kafir. Where people say such and such is a kafir, they call that takfir in Arabic. Just in case some people don't know.
This whole takfir phenomena, I remember as a young student coming back from South Africa, my upbringing was probably very different to yours, possibly, where I was grounded into Dini studies or religious studies since a young age. Right, my father himself, rahimahullah, was a prominent qari of Toronto. Um, so when I came back as a student, Mufti, I remember that a certain segment of scholars who I was affiliating with back in those days, they were actually making takfir, or almost making takfir, of one of my mentors, right, Sheikh Yusuf Badat, who at that time, along with other scholars, introduced the global sighting phenomena for the sake of ease, in terms of moon sighting, the whole global sighting phenomena for the sake of ease for the people of Canada. I remember that's how intolerant things were. And then, subhanAllah, what happens is, like, just after a few years, people fall into that same thing, the same thing that they were about to make takfir of, people embrace it. So where did all your takfiring around go? You know what I'm saying? And this is so common. Making takfir of people very easily who disagree with your opinion, although there's some asl for that opinion found, the asl of their opinion found in the deen. So this is a very common, or this is a situation which is actually harming Islamic scholarship a lot as well. And it's harming Islamic scholarship to such extent that you look at just Chicago, right, a nearby city where I work, near to Peoria. Statistics show that out of because of all this bickering, of course it transcends into the community. People don't understand. People then become confused about the Deen of Islam, or Islamic teachings, and confusion eventually leads them to leaving the Deen. Right. So in Chicago, in Chicago itself, or I forget the exact statistics, either the U.S. or Chicago. Out of every four Muslims, one is an ex-Muslim. So this is actually documented now. Sorry. And I think it goes back to scholarship of how irresponsible we are about our words and our treatment of one another. So, so me personally, I'm a very hopeful person, and maybe my hope is irrational. But I basically, if you are thinking realistically, based on the statistics, my own personal statistics of the scholarly circles that I'm in, if such attitude towards the deen continues,
Right, sorry,
people are
just
just
to, I
bickering
think there
around.
was some issue with when I was asking the question. I'll just repeat the question. What I'd said, I think that's because, sorry, as I'd switched through the slides on the podcast, on the broadcasting it, the mic went off. So what I was asking was, do you see much hope, much optimism? Do you see any optimism? Do you see some optimism with regards to the future of ulama, of students of knowledge within the States, within Canada? Because we were discussing this yesterday as it was, and now, over to where you are. What do you see on the ground? Because you're quite young, you've recently graduated, you've got a lot of friends who are on a similar kind of platform to you.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So, in that regard, firstly, I should say it's time for the young scholars to stop living in idolizing. Stop living in idolizing others. Come out of that forceful circle. Understand the reality. Once again, I'm very optimistic, but based on the realities that I'm seeing, a lot of people are being sort of turned away from the religious scholarship, either because they're not tolerant of different opinions. So, for example, in the U.S., our communities are very diverse. Like, it's very difficult for me to stay in Peoria, Illinois, and be a strict Hanafi. If you know what I'm saying, Mufti. The communities are very diverse. There's a need to compromise.
Of course.
There's a need, yeah. There's a big need actually to compromise, and if that compromising is not tolerated by, say, a cut or strict sector of Muslim scholarship, I think it causes a lot of imbalance in different communities. But going back to your question, I see hope from the young scholarship who've sort of drifted off from this forceful idolizing or idolization. I see hope from some of my colleagues in that regard. A lot of them actually are doing great work with their communities. But in terms of the majority, I'm really hesitant to say yes, there is hope. I'm really hesitant.
You know what you said earlier on about you felt that, look, if you disagree with people, you disagree with your own kind of that fraternity, what happens is they teach, they advocate to boycott you. But what I wanted to say, just to just my thoughts on that to you, Shaykh, is that, look, yes, they will attempt to kind of people, because unfortunately religion, generally speaking, with a capital R, and Islam is no exception, has been institutionalized. A lot of it is about...
Which in my opinion is wrong, Mufti. Sorry.
Of course, no, I agree with you. It's absolutely
institutionalized.
But I'm just saying, because it is, and a lot of it is to do with power, a lot of it is to do with control. Therefore, people will, unfortunately, if they see you jeopardizing or questioning their control, they will try and knock your legs out from underneath you, because the point is they don't want you rising or jeopardizing their power in the situation.
As I mentioned to you earlier, Mufti, even if that contradicts the Quran.
Of course, I mean, this has never been about the Quran. This has never been about Iman or Islam. It has been unquestionably about power. Now,
cultism.
Yes, of course, because that is ultimately power to that sheikh, whoever runs the cult, whoever runs it, even if he has an element of sincerity. I'm not saying he doesn't, but there are underlying power structures, power dynamics at play.
Yeah.
Now, but what I wanted to say to you was that, where people do cut these, they kind of block off these roads. A good few years ago, found myself at a crossroad. Yeah. Now, people had, at the time, they'd said to me that, look, so going back to like maybe the year 2010, 2011, And moving forward to about 2014, 15 even, between that gap, I was very keen on networking. So, when we spoke earlier on and I said I'd traveled abroad, I went to close to where you were, St. Louis. I went there on 2 occasions. I participated in the university lectures, annual lectures. At that time, I was very keen in networking, in kind of traveling, in doing this stuff, in trying to kind of build these bridges with these ulama. I traveled to Europe on several occasions, Spain, lectured there, Belgium 2 occasions, I went to the Netherlands, I went to, within the UK I was going. Now, this is before, even though I had Facebook at some of that time, beginning 2012, but I was still building on the Facebook situation. Now,
Yeah.
my point is that I came to a crossroad where a lot of people said to me, a few people said to me that, look, Mufti, we want to get you more and more involved. We're happy with that, but we're going to be real with you that you've got to give on some of these things. You've got to compromise on one, your dress. Now, when I used to go to these places, I never used to go like this in a t-shirt. I used to go in a suit. So some of them said, could you put a topi on at least? That was some people. Or even if you don't, could you slightly grow out the beard on the side?
Yeah.
Or they said to me that, like, what you've got to kind of not crack jokes and not do these things, and basically you've got to compromise on your outlook and a bit on the way you dress and the way you behave. Now, if you're prepared to do that, we will open up more and more of these platforms for you. Now, I found, wallahi, I seriously at that time, this is probably going about 6 years back, I really thought about it for a short period of time because I, at that time, was so keen in getting out there, and networking and spreading what I had to say. But then, I thought in the end that, look, if I do what they're saying, then I felt kind of violated in going, because this is me at the end of the day, and I'm having to pretend to be somebody just so I get, like, they give me this platform. Now, I declined those offers. There were a few key kind of organizations and people that were kind of saying this to me. Now, I declined it and said, look, it is how it is. Like, I am like this, and I'm very keen on kind of coordinating with you, but I am, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to put a topi on. I'm not going to kind of grow out my beard. I'm not going to change, modify my kind of behavior and stuff like this, or kind of calm down on my opinions. I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
And wallahi, even though at the time I thought to myself, damn, so those opportunities kind of went. In time to come, the platform that I found on social media, the people that I did find, the audience, or people who I could actually help and benefit with my words, whoever they were genuine. And it was built from bottom up. It wasn't handed to me by a sect or denomination.
Sure.
And these people, then they allow, like, as you develop and grow, you have nobody to kind of, like, I don't have to think, oh, I have to try and please this person or this committee or this scholar or this. I just have to make sure that the argument is compelling to me. And this is what I want to say to you, Shaykh, that look, even if it is bothersome, even if it is quite crippling at this stage, in time to come, you will be so glad that the people that you what you built as an effort was you, like, as what is it, मैं अकेला ही चला था जानिबे मंजिल मगर, log साथ आते गए कारवां बनता गया. That this caravan that you're going to have, this kind of caravan, is something sincere. So not to be disheartened in any way.
Sure. I took your advice to heart earlier when I reached out to you as well. You spoke similar words to me. And definitely, I'm sort of building on that. A lot of people unconditionally appreciate you when you're sincere, even if you go against the norm, possibly, or what is perceived to be the norm. For sure, Mufti. Barakallah feek for that.
No, sure, no, you're most welcome. It's it's good to see people who have some cojones in that sense to kind of to be able to stand up against the tide, against the current. Like I speak to people, and all too often I find them lacking substance.
I'm
Like
probably being bashed right now on these groups just speaking pure.
चलता है यार,
Who
चलता है
cares? Who
boss.
cares?
So
Yeah, it's you just got to
so
deal with it,
who? I mean, why do they matter anyway? Why do people matter? The people that
It's fine.
criticize you. I mean, this is what I was saying earlier on. And somebody had asked a question. What does that mean? Sorry, what did that mean about being true to yourself? What it meant was not having to put. You see, we have all kinds of concerns. Imagine it's a hierarchy, people. We've got all kinds of concern, and you've got the top, the main focus. Now, you've got like what your family will think, your friends will think, what people will think, what people on Facebook will think, what social media will think. But these things should, and as a human being, maybe on your list. If it should be right at the bottom. The main thing is what you believe to be true. You can live by it. Like you're not worried. You're not kind of like you're not so cowed in, so kind of terrified by other people that you have to live a fake life. That's what I mean. I don't mean like kind of having to curb certain things in. We have social appropriation. I'm not against that. Like obviously, if my parents were here, I'm not going to be kind of swearing. I'm going to be much more respectful. If I was with my mates, I'll be much more relaxed. If I'm around my children, I'll be slightly different. If I'm around at work, I'll be slightly different. I don't mean social appropriation. I mean that you're pretending to be somebody that even you deep down is not happy with.
Yeah, that's just in a sense personal hypocrisy, I guess, if I can give it that term.
I wanted to ask you, speaking about ulama, speaking about all this kind of, and earlier on, prior to that, the kind of global calamity that's going on, and how ulama as a people are either helping or failing people or whatever they're doing. And you mentioned about some that are still insisting on going back to the masjid. I'm not sure if you've heard, I've seen today quite a few messages, and yesterday, of people saying things like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to whether we blast it or not, but we're going to on the speakers call out the adhan. We're going to do it at homes. Some messages said if after Maghrib you can do 7 adhans every day. Some masjid said we're going to do an adhan at a particular time, not a salah time, at a particular time of the day in response to coronavirus. What on earth is this? I want your thoughts on this. What is it? Is this a new cure that we've come across for corona? Have you come across these messages, by the way?
There was actually a talk. There was actually a talk of that happening in Canada. One of the more prominent Barelvi sort of imams in Calgary announced that from their platform, and it went viral actually.
That we should do the adhan.
Yeah.
Maybe coronavirus.
It was actually laughed at among some of our circles. Some of the more non-denominational circles. Some of the more non-denominational circles actually laughed at it, but it was taken.
If coronavirus is coming at full speed and it hears the adhan and it just stops, goes, "Yaar, namaz ka waqt ho gaya, yaar, it's time for salah. Allahu Akbar."
Once again, strain L will speak to strain S.
Coronavirus turns around and says, "What do you think, we're kafirs or something? Of course we pray." What if the coronavirus thinks because it's the adhan, it all goes to the masjid?
So basically, Mufti, they interpreted so basically when situations occurred in the time of the Prophet ﷺ where they had to pray in their homes. You know, the adhan was called, and after the hayya al-falah, it was said, you know, sallu fi buyutikum, pray in your homes. I think they took sort of that hadith out of context, and then they applied it to the coronavirus by saying, well, you know, just this whole adhan phenomena, just do it from your homes. I don't know how that happened, but it was laughed at for sure among the more rational sort of imam groups.
I mean, you see, the thing is that back then, in the Prophet's time, some people would have gone, like the Prophet would have gone to the masjid. You have to remember the Prophet's house was next door to the masjid. Yeah. Now, the Prophet would have gone to the masjid. Maybe one person would have turned up, but it was raining. Now, the Prophet ﷺ would have said, you know what, tell people they don't need to come. So the person calling the adhan would have said, because how else would he notify them? So in the adhan, he said, not in the adhan, but alongside or before, he would have announced, generally, ala sallu fi rihalikum, that pray in your places, your in your homes or wherever you are. Now, this is simply over rain, which isn't so much of a big deal, one could argue, but this is just simply what this didn't mean is that everybody must go to the masjid to do adhan in all kind of outbreaks or all kind of scenarios, and therefore tell, you know, like, it wasn't meant to become a new ritual per se.
Yeah, but that's how the people are perceiving it now.
Yeah, so they've turned it into a new ritual.
Make it a ritual, right, to scare away coronavirus. Yeah.
So, I mean, people, now there's talk about this Hajj being cancelled, yeah, which most likely it will be. Mm-hmm. Have you seen much of a reaction to this? I mean, people getting very emotional, saying this is the end of the world now because Hajj has been cancelled. I don't know if you've seen any of this or come across it. Have you?
I have seen many, like I'm sure there's videos out there as well where people are showing their emotions. But I think they failed to look at Islamic history when Hajj was cancelled multiple times. Yeah. Some are actually making entire series on how Qiyamah is coming because Hajj is being cancelled in 2020, which I find baffling, sort of.
You know what's fascinating, what many people don't know, and I've briefly mentioned this before, is that there was this is just one example, there was a sect known as the Qaramita, which is named after somebody called Hamdan Qarmat. Now, he was an Ismaili Shia who, they have their disagreements within the Ismailiyah, but he disagreed with the other Ismailiyah from North Africa and the Fatimids, and they set up their own dynasty. Now, he's around the 300 Hijri mark, around that kind of time, so about 300 years after the Prophet. Now, during the year, if I recall, I think it was the year 317. In 317 Hijri, they attack Mecca and Medina. Mm-hmm. Now, Mecca especially, and they land one day before Hajj, and people are on Yom Tarwiyah, they are in Mina and getting ready for Arafah the next day, and he attacks and they just kill people because according to their interpretation, Hajj was a pagan ritual, so they did not believe that people that were doing Hajj were doing a good thing. So they ransacked, obviously killed several, they say, some reports say 30,000, whatever, they killed thousands of people. They went to the Kaaba, they broke down the door, stole the door of the Kaaba. Mm-hmm. They say that they threw so many bodies in the well of Zamzam that it blocked it up. And they held control of these regions and reigned and kind of fear throughout this region. They stole the black stone, by the way, and they took it back to Hijr, which is still in modern day Saudi Arabia, and that was their kind of capital, whatever. And they were trying to set up a parallel pilgrimage thing, but it didn't work out. A lot of people didn't follow it. However, for up until, I believe it was 339 Hijri, that I believe it was about that, but it was over about 20 to 22 years. The black stone was not returned, and Hajj had ceased, like absolutely
Yeah,
been cancelled. They had said anybody who
for
goes
sure.
there, they will kill him because they saw it as a pagan kind of ritual. So over 2 decades, if not, and in the centuries that came afterwards, there were other dangers, and people had as well 50,000 dinars from the Abbasi Caliph, and eventually they took a threat from the Fatimid kind of ruler who said that, it was, by the way, the person who'd taken it, his name was Abu Tahir al-Jannabi, and he was one of the main kind of Qaramita people. So they told him, that Abu Tahir al-Jannabi, that if you don't return this, I believe it was Al-Hakim bi Amrillah al-Fatimi from Egypt, who said to him, who was also Ismaili, who said, if you don't return this black stone, we're gonna bring an army and deal with you once and for all, with your kind of a little empire that you've got. So he eventually returns it, and he returns it with a quote by trying to say, huh, and he says, okay, we'll return it. So he takes it back and he says, أخذناه بقدر الله ورددناه بمشيئته, that we took this by the might of Allah and we return it by His will. And it's just he thought, chalo, dialogue, I'll throw a dialogue. And this guy was ruthless. I mean, when he did ransack the Kaaba, Mecca, and he took it over, he announced, actually, he had like this poem where he announced that Ana billahi wa billahi ana, that he said Ana billahi wa billahi ana yakhluqul khalq wa afnihim ana, that he
Wow,
said, I
that's
am
crazy.
by Allah, and Allah is, like, I mean, depends how you want to understand it, but whether Allah is affirming me or however, or whether He is by me, but he says Allah creates creation and I destroy them. So this is the thing is, my point is, that's a tragic piece of the past. Yet surprisingly, he set up one of the first socialist states in recent history, where the state would give debts, they would take up loans, they would repay them, the state would provide property, the state would provide rationing, the state would provide marriages for people. I mean, there's a huge contradiction in this personality of people like Abu Tahir al-Jannabi, Abu Sa'id al-Jannabi. But my point is, the tragedy aside, this thought that this is a sign of the hour because it's never happened before, this kind of melodrama. I mean, it's just because we're not acquainted with our own history.
For sure, Mufti. Jazakallah khairan for elaborating.
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a few people are asking about Mindtrap. Mindtrap, yes, this is a dialogue show, people. It's to deal with difficult dialogues and crucial conversations that are out there and are needed to be had. So yes, it is a new show that I'm doing. So if you do have thoughts on it, if you have certain things that I need to talk about, do kind of message me about them. But yeah, so I mean, people.
Mufti, a question for you.
Yeah, go for it, man. Go for it, Imam Saab. Fire away.
Hey, don't call me Imam Sahib, man. That's like making me sound like an old Pakistani uncle, man.
Sheikh. Naam, go for it, Sheikh. Itrah.
Just a question that I was sort of reflecting upon after seeing your fatwa on abortion.
Okay, sure.
So, of course, I may
And
disagree with you.
Americans, this is a really hot topic, especially in America.
Yeah.
I mean, regardless of religion, the state.
Sure.
I mean,
Of course, I may have my disagreements with you, with
No
all
problem.
honor, of
No
course, but
no problem. I'll just kind of mute that part when you speak. I'll just switch the speaker off.
But
cut
just to
your
give
mic
some
out.
perspective, Sheikh, just to give some perspective to your fatwa, inshallah. Should it be consensual? Like, should there be the consent of both parties? Or, for example, you know how it happens sort of in our context where the sisters sort of just go to the abortion clinics. And I understand there's a whole human rights component attached to that. I'm not speaking in that regard. I'm just saying Islamically, based on what you said, should she talk to her husband beforehand, or should the husband,
Or should she surprise him?
yeah,
Surprise,
because it has
surprise.
happened. It has happened in certain contexts, and I think entire families were hurt in that regard when there was no need to be hurt. Should that aspect be there, Mufti?
I definitely believe so. I think that these are decisions which, it's interesting because I do believe in the woman having, because I'm not sure how the American narrative is kind of phrased and exactly, just in case I kind of get it wrong, but I do believe it's her body, her choice.
Yeah, America/Canada, yeah.
Sure. So I definitely do support that people, that there is a freedom in that. I know some people are very anti-abortion. I personally am not in that sense at all like that. I feel that it's up to the individual. It's up to the woman who's carrying the child that gets to make that decision. But however, I feel it is an important ingredient, an element in that equation, is that if this is an abortion from a relationship, I mean, like, it could be an abortion from a one night stand, it could be an abortion from something else, it could be that the woman isn't really in a relationship with the guy, maybe she just knows him and they've just, she's got pregnant,
Yeah.
like it does, accidentally, he tripped.
Yeah.
Now, my point is that if it is from a relationship, then I feel that conversation, it is an obligation, a moral obligation, an ethical obligation, which I feel is endorsed by Islam as an Islamic obligation, that a conversation should be had, that they should, there should be some kind of dialogue. Now, there could be, I understand, this would give rise to the other question, that what if there's a disagreement? That
Sure.
the husband says you must have it, and she says I don't want it.
Or vice versa. Yeah.
You see, that's a tricky one, and that said, I would have to kind of eventually kind of preponderate on the side with it is her body, and although, I mean, as a man, I could I would personally, if I was in that situation, be very hurt if I did want something, like, let's say I did want a family, I did want a child, and the woman said no, no. But yet, from a so from an emotional perspective, I totally get that, and I feel that it's only fair that there is a crucial participation of kind of opinion. But but then, if it comes to a clash where only one gets to have it, you can't go both ways. You can't be like, well, you're gonna get it and you're gonna get it. So in that sense, I would feel she preponderates, as in it is ultimately going to be her choice. But I feel that where there's scenarios where there's no conversations being had, like a woman just, like she just goes, has the abortion, and it's just later on, this is just information being told. I feel that's kind of very unfair, and I feel that if the way that could be made fair, if I'm going to say that, is there should be a caveat then. If that's how people are going to treat it, then it should be that if the child is going to be had, like they are going to have the child, then the father has the right for complete abandonment. And therefore, no kind of benefits, and no, he doesn't have to pay and contribute. Like, what I'm trying to say is, if the father's opinion categorically doesn't even count, then fine. But then there should also be that option that the father would have the right to say, well, I don't want to be a part of this, and disappear and not have to contribute financially. I'm just saying, what I'm trying to say is, I know that's not something that I'm opting for as a good thing, by the way. But what I'm trying to say is, if we're going down this road, down this rabbit hole, then that should also be there. That's what I'm trying to say.
But unfortunately, I don't know if you would say unfortunately, but in this regard,
like somebody like Imran Khan has just said, my money, my choice. He's like, well, if I chose not to buy protection, then I can choose here as well. Yeah, so.
But in this regard, I don't think there's any legal ramifications in place, right? So if say the woman goes without the consent or without the agreement of her husband to have an abortion, I don't think she can legally be taken to task.
I don't think so, no. I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Sure.
I mean, this whole thing is very kind of, this whole realm of sex stuff and legality is a very daunting kind of arena in this day and age. I was reading about America that there's something which I've read. I didn't know, for the people in case you think I already knew this with my vast knowledge, that they call stealthing. Now, stealthing apparently is if during sex the guy was to remove the condom. This is that they call that stealthing, but as in to remove it and the woman wasn't aware that he removed it. So in between, she couldn't tell, but he had removed it in between. So they call that stealthing. And I've read in, I think, 3 states in America that constitutes rape. I was like, whoa. That's like, I mean, he could have said, well, my body, my choice. If I want plastic.
And then Mufti, how far does this my body, my choice go? Like, for example,
Mera jism, meri marzi.
In relation to mixed bathrooms, you guys have any of those in the US?
In the UK? I think generally no, unless some places, it may be due to restrictions they have to share, but I think generally by and large no, it is gender segregated. But I think if a company or a shop or something just had one toilet, so then they would have to announce it as, this is for both genders, whatever. But I think that's just due to capacity. Otherwise, by and large...
I'm speaking about, say, bathrooms where both the genders could be in there at once.
All right. I think they may exist, but in only due to capacity, I think.
Well, they exist
by and large, it doesn't... The general thing is gender segregation, as far as I'm aware, but I could be wrong. But I mean, what about in the States where you are?
So I actually was lecturing at one of the universities, and I walked into such a bathroom by accident.
I'm serious, Mufti. Okay, tell me one thing, Imam Sahab, that ye accident bar kyun hota raha? Why did you keep on?
Relax.
You had to constantly keep going back to the toilet.
But that was the most.
I've had a lot of caffeine. I just gotta give me a few minutes. I'll just be back. You know what? I'm gonna redo my wudu again for the next salah. It's always virtuous to do wudu upon wudu. I'm just going back to the gender united bathroom.
I guess we should just conclude that.
No, so okay, so what's the so how was that then? So you're at university.
That was the worst experience of my life. That was the fastest wudu I made, in that bathroom.
Come on, it couldn't be that bad.
Okay, no, what I was getting to, Mufti, is what if those, I don't think we go through that thought process before coming to such decisions of having, mixed bathrooms. Say there's a rape case or a rape allegation, right? In that regard. And you just...
In the bathroom?
Yeah, in the bathroom.
Okay.
Like, for example, you're just...
Or sexually inappropriate. Because I think rape is a bit out, but like sexual inappropriate kind of maybe a touch
sort of like sexual harassment or some sort of aren't we just like planning
if he's accidentally looking in that, he can't help but try and look into the cubicle.
Aren't we just setting ourselves up to be in trouble then? Like, for example, aren't we just setting ourselves up to prepare for such allegations?
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, You see, there's a difference in what is it? Men and women being equal as human beings, as in human rights, in these kind of freedoms, in having the right to liberty, the right to happiness in that sense. But there is a huge difference in saying there is now there is 100% symmetry between the genders. Like there is no, everything is mirrored. We are identical in everything. A man is just basically a woman with an extra organ. But even that's not a mirrored. No, actually, you couldn't say a man is extra. I suppose women have certain features that are extra as well. But it's, I think people are taking it just way too far.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes more so in the States and maybe parts of Canada and stuff like that, I think. Or am I wrong?
No, you're right. But I think Trump is sort of putting certain restrictions on such bathrooms after he came into power. But otherwise, it's very common. Like I've seen these mixed. I don't know what to call them.
Gender neutral.
Yes, gender neutral bathrooms. Yeah, for sure.
Somebody's asked here. They've said, well, speaking about rape, isn't rape an uphill struggle to prove within Islam? And Zeba has asked a question as well, and I'll just come to your question, Zeba, in just a moment, about relationships and marriages. But this thing, since it's relevant to what you've just said, Shaykh, about rape, and somebody could do this, and you're trying to say, well, and I agree with you that although I think rape is a bit out there, it's a bit kind of like the old Bollywood. I'm trying to picture, somebody walks into a gender neutral and it's like, whoa.
I was just thinking a Shah Rukh Khan movie when I said that.
This is going way beyond that. You got to go back to the old Amrish Puri days. The Gulshan Grover days. Bad, man. But the thing, this is way before your time, Maulana Sahab. But what I agree with the sexual harassment, or what people may say they were perving. So, for example, if a woman's in the toilet cubicle and the guy's going in and he's looking, is he looking as in just taking an observation? Is he perving? Is he what? And these kind of allegations, or accidentally touches her hand or something, or how does it go? So I totally agree with you, but somebody has asked, being so conscientious about that, wouldn't you say Islam trying to prove rape it's a mission within Islam? So Islam is kind of biased and against the victim. That's what it seems like the questioner is asking. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Shaykh.
So I don't think Islam is biased in that regard. I believe, even if you go through the fiqh books, Mufti, the whole Darul Qadha concept gives a whole lot of weight to the woman's claim in that regard. Say a woman comes to the Islamic court, or the sort of the judge, and says that this is what happened to me. It's not as such that her statement is just thrown off or deemed as insignificant. I believe, from what I read, a lot of weight is given to her statement. But once again, they would sort of do their own research before just dismissing the case. Yeah. I don't know what are your thoughts on
absolutely. And I just wanted to also mention for the questioner, David, that look, there was a distinction. A lot of classical fiqh gave rape the death penalty. Yeah. Now, that was called a had. Okay. Now, for the had, for the death penalty, they had 4 witnesses and this kind of really meticulous kind of criteria, which was, as the questioner had said, is almost very difficult to find in a rape scenario, and I would agree. But that was not the only punishment. So the punishment beneath that was called ta'zir, and ta'zir was what the judge saw fit. For ta'zir, you did not require, there would obviously be something in the trial. It could be circumstantial evidence, it could be partial testimonies, there could even be no testimony, but it's what the judge is kind of gathering from the case. So for example, the person has priors, there's certain things in other areas that seem to weigh in on this, so the person, based on that, may feel that this person is guilty. So, for example, even in the courts of law here, you have what is beyond reasonable doubt, and you have a balance of probabilities, which is dealt with in family law courts and other kind of courts. So, the judge would deem that, but if they weren't the witnesses, they weren't the four people, he couldn't execute the person. He could not take life. But he could still punish him. He could say asijin lisana, he could do taghribu am, have him kind of sent away, he could impose fines, so there was a lot of the fact that what people are mixing up, because the Sharia in that sense doesn't really exist today except in the textbooks. So people are assuming that in Islam, if a person could not provide 4 witness testimonies, that the culprit, even if the circumstantial, like let's say for example, it's very clear this woman's, you could check with the medical evidence, they could check by a doctor, there's been bruising, sure. There's been, they could tell that, let's say there was circumstantial, or one person saw, or a child saw something. Now, but you can't prove it through multiple witnesses. They're assuming the person walked away scot-free. And that is not the case. Qat'an. That the judge, in almost all of those cases, would take circumstantial evidence into account. But they just wouldn't do the had, they would do ta'zir. So they might say this person gets imprisoned, this person has to pay this much money, this person gets imprisoned and has to pay this much money, this person is even going to get, ostracized from this region after having served a particular sentence, or this person will get whipped a certain amount, because you could whip. There was corporal punishment historically in the books that was up to a certain amount, like up to 80 lashes or up to certain things.
Sure.
Now, all of this exists, so it's a misconception that, the old fuqaha thought if you couldn't provide 4 witnesses, the guy, you just kind of shake his hand, or the judge kind of, man to man kind of winks at him and says, you know what, don't worry, we'll take one for the team, off you go. It wasn't anything like that, so that's an absolute misunderstanding, wallahi. And I think it's disappointing that more imams and shuyukh haven't clarified this, because a lot of ex-Muslims or a lot of atheists sometimes think that, or Islamophobes sometimes. So, and by the way, they can think this genuinely. I'm not trying to say they are hating on Islam, but they might genuinely believe that. Right, so okay,
Mufti, that's all amazing in theory. That's all amazing in theory, for sure. When we read the justice in our traditions in that regard, it's awesome. But I think practically Muslims are really not making a really a good image out of these teachings. For example, you just look at Amnesty International, how many innocent punishments they've reported against, say, women in Saudi
absolutely
for being the victim of rape, and the guy gets away scot-free. So
and I totally agree with you.
A lot of non-Muslims, they make that their benchmark to understand Islam, and a lot of ex-Muslims determine that to be Islam.
Shukran for bringing that up, Shaykh, because people may have had that as a kind of thought caveat that, look, but wait a minute, in Saudi this has happened and it's been reported in the papers. Amnesty has got several kind of petitions regarding these things in Iran, over there. And I agree, and I first of all would like to say that I think it's unfortunate that Muslim imams and shuyukh and Islamic bodies don't actually support organizations like Amnesty. Secondly, because I wholeheartedly would and do. Secondly, I would like to say this is a distinction between societies and what Islam is saying. Saudi Arabia is not by any measure a manifestation of Islam. Yes, they happen to be Muslim and they have certain interpretations. Neither is Iran, neither is Pakistan, neither is Egypt. I mean, these are Muslims with a lot of culture, with a lot of social problems.
See, that's where I don't see hope once again, Mufti. You and I could lose our voices in echoing these sentiments, but that's not what the media will echo. And that's not what the ex-Muslims who have a certain agenda lined up against Islam will echo. They'll echo that to be Islam, and they'll try to find isolated or weak or made up practically made up traditions in that regard to prove that, what Saudi is doing as a representation of Islam, or Pakistan in that regard, or whatever, or the other countries that you mentioned.
I would like to put a little kind of caveat in there that I do believe that there are many, when it comes to ex-Muslims or atheists, I believe that there are many of them who I believe are actually sincere, and they're not just kind of doing. They are troublemakers, just like everywhere, but they are very genuine people as well, who have also been, like, I don't blame them sometimes. Like, when you watch this stuff, you see somebody in Saudi getting beaten, you see a woman being mistreated in Iran, and the guy getting away. I don't blame them from taking that judgment.
Even a person like me who studied Islam, sometimes we think twice. What the heck is going on?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, may Allah make things easy. It's a travesty, really. So difficult, the situation. But inshallah, there's hope. There's an awakening. There's a kind of like a gradual consciousness of these issues, inshallah. Sure. So we hope to see them better. There is a question, since we're speaking on the other end of this kind of theme, really to do with relationships where they are genuine relationships. Zeba had asked about a wife, widow, / parental benefits in polygamy marriages. Now, I know when it comes to marriages, Shaykh, you yourself kind of went against the mold, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right, so
transfer.
So you kind of went against cultural norms, and you married out of your culture. Is it? I mean, if you wanted to, what were your kind of experiences on that? Because this is a big topic, marriages. A lot of people are struggling to get married sometimes within Muslim communities. What are your thoughts?
I got disowned. I got disowned.
You got disowned by the wife.
Alhamdulillah, my mother was very supportive. I can't say the same about the rest of the family. So my wife's from Syria. My immediate connections are to India, but at a grandparent level, at a great-grandparent level, we go back to Baghdad, but no one's going to believe you when you say your last name is Mazhar Patel.
I thought you were going to say at a grandparent level we go back to Adam alayhi salam. So okay, so yep. So how was so you married outside the family? You married an Assyrian, an Arab. Being a Desi yourself, being Indian, which is very kind of also the whole caste system, the whole thing.
Yeah.
What was how did you find that? Were your family cool about it, or were they?
Well, to be honest, my mother was cool about it. Sometimes she gives me, a bit of trouble about it until now, that, I wish you married a Gujarati girl or whatever. But
she says
for the most part, alhamdulillah, my family's cool about it. I actually didn't even want to get married. The way I got married was pretty unique as well. We can share that.
Do tell.
We can save it for another day. But
did you say to her?
Going on a road trip, Mufti? We were going. I was actually going on a road trip, and then one of my friends calls me and says, "So you're coming, right? You're coming to town." So the place where he lived was basically a bit away from where I was going, right, on my road trip. So he said, "Are you coming, right?" I said, "Coming where?" He said, "You're coming to see the girl, right?" I said, "Which girl?"
He said, "I've seen so many. Which one are you talking about?"
Yeah, which girl? I didn't even want to get married. So then he starts playing the guilt card on me, like, "Oh, Shaykh, you always do this. You asked me to find you a good girl, and now when I find you somebody, you're backing down on me."
You're like good. You're like, who said good was in the criteria? I prefer to be a bit on the naughty side. Good. मुझे क्या जमात पढ़ानी है उनके साथ? You think I want to pray salah and nafal?
So basically, I was with some other guys. We were taking this road trip, and long story short, we stopped by my wife Sham's house.
Okay.
Sham.
Sham. Oh yes, your daughter's name is Sham.
Yes. Um, and their family's like confused because I'm with my buddies. We're going on a road trip. They're like, "Who's coming to see the girl?
They're
Which
like,
guys coming to
"Ye
see
kaun
the girl?"
sa? What kind of a?" They got this ain't gonna be like some kind of like a joint understanding here. They go up ज़्यादा ही open minded हो यार.
Yeah.
They go
And then
माशाल्लाह यानी
and then
वो
we just met
متفتح
there.
الذهن हुआ यानी ذهنه
Yeah.
متفتح جدا.
Yeah. We just met with my wife there, basically, and
Okay.
I spoke to her for a few months, and then we got married. That's it.
Wow. Okay. Mashallah. But generally, the cultural differences, have they served as barriers or not really, or what's the?
There is a language barrier for sure between my mother and my wife.
Well, it's a good thing she didn't marry her then.
For me, there's no
No, I'm
cultural
joking.
barrier.
Yeah.
For me, there's no cultural barrier. We get along, alhamdulillah. A lot of my teachers were from that region, so I'm introduced to, their culture, so to speak. So, alhamdulillah.
Somebody's asking, what's the culture of your wife? She's Syrian. Syrian, yes?
Syrian, yes.
Syrian, yes.
He's from Homs.
Homs. Allah, Allah. So what would you say now, as Zeba had asked, that look, there's widows, there's sometimes divorcees, there's people, there's marriage difficulties in society, there's polygamy sometimes going on, sometimes they're just struggling to find other relationships. She'd asked it wasn't a clear question, it was just polygamy, widows, this, whatever question mark.
So, like marrying widows, is there anything wrong with that?
No, not as in is it wrong, but there is a crisis in Muslim cultures, in Muslim societies, that there's a lot of people who are between a certain age, like let's say maybe in the early 30s to mid 40s, a lot of women that are not married because they've been divorced, like they've gone through a divorce, or maybe in some cases they've been widowed, or more so divorces. They sometimes struggle with getting into a new relationship. So what are your thoughts on that, and is, for example, polygamy a solution to that? I think that was her question.
So I'll answer question number 2 first. I personally think in a Canadian context or an American context, polygamy is not the solution, because we've actually had a very bad name in the media for going against the law in this regard, where certain imams were secretly performing marriages.
Yeah, but just to be clear, a nikah is not a legal marriage. So there wouldn't be a law against a nikah.
But Canadian law would say otherwise, Mufti. Any sort of a ceremony,
A religious ceremony.
any sort of a religious ceremony would.
Are you sure?
I don't think you can be penalized in the court of law for it, but it is against the law for sure. There was a whole.
Because in the UK, there's a clear distinction between state and religion, and therefore, any religious ceremonies are not against the law. So if a person had, let's say to them, they are just partners. So you can have, you're free to have as many partners as you like, and you can do whatever you want in your religion. But according to the state, marriage is a statutory, legal kind of event as well, entity, which can only happen with one person.
So a while back, I would say a few months ago, one of our mainstream news media, they actually did an entire article. They actually did entire segment in this regard, where they actually busted through secret cameras various imams who were performing secret nikahs, and then they basically or secret second nikahs, to be exact, and they basically showed in that whole documentary or whole segment how this, although it's a religious ceremony, goes against Canadian law.
No, but look, see, somebody had asked here as well, if they publicly pronounce they are husband and wife, they are good as married under common law. No, they're not. Now, the thing is that that happened in the UK as well, by the way, this undercover journalist investigation, and there was a whole kind of there was a series of kind of sting operations. Now,
Yeah.
I feel that was part of the narrative was wrong. So you see, you know this thing that a nikah is not a marriage, because these imams and these masjids and these mulvis and madrasas don't clarify that. That was the problem. They were using words like marriage. Now you can't use that
No,
word because it's a
What they
legal
were
word.
doing in that documentary Mufti was the imam was clearly telling the person who came for the sting operation, as sort of a client who wanted to get married, the imam was clearly saying to the government, you would say that this is my girlfriend, or this is sort of my
No, but that you see, but that's my point, because you are teaching it in a crafty manner, like you're trying to teach it as a loophole. It's not a loophole. It's just what it is. Like you wouldn't say, like what I'm trying to say is because they were using words which were also legal words. So you see, like there's a legal word like tax. Now you also use the word tax. Now you say, oh, we're dealing with taxes. And then you say, oh, but by taxes, I don't mean those taxes, I mean something. That's a problem because you're using legal terminology with different meanings. So when you use the term marriage, you see, marriage is a legal term. So when you say, oh, we're conducting your marriage here today, but if they ask, do it like this. Now this is just categorically wrong. But if the teachings and the narrative was clear that these are not marriages, these are nikahs, and they just use the term nikah, not zawaj. They use the term nikah.
I get what you're saying.
They distinguish between a zawaj and a nikah. And they say this is just a nikah, it's an aqdun nikah, and it's like people being in, for example, whether they want to be in plural relationships or not. Then the law, it wouldn't be something kind of crafty and shady and seedy, and it would be something open. But a lot of what was happening here with secret marriages are something else, by the way. Secret, like I don't agree with people doing these things and keeping them as secrets, and because they're just doing it to harm people. That's a different thing in and of itself. Zeba had clarified her question by sending in, do all the widows in a polygamous marriage receive benefits from the government? I'm not sure I understood that, because I don't think
widows trying to look for adequate spouses. There are, alhamdulillah, in North America, we do have a lot of avenues for that, where actually certain masajid facilitate decent meetups.
Yeah. Oh, do they? Okay. I think personally that the States are way ahead of the UK when it comes to masjid functionality.
Yeah. So basically, say ISNA, it's an organization here.
Yeah.
Or say our annual RIS conference that happens, where different speakers are called. They actually have a segment in that conference which is dedicated to sort of like a marriage bureau theme, where people actually register and they are introduced to compatible spouses based on the analytics that RIS collects or ISNA collects. And this actually happens in a lot of masajid as well. It's very common, to be honest.
I see. No. But I mean, do you not find over here, I do see it as a big problem, to be fair. This whole, like people don't know what to do. They don't know where to go to. There is a lot of social media availability, but then a lot of them are not genuine. And I mean, it is a problem. I don't have a solution, but
a lot of them charge an arm and a leg. Why can't the masjids there facilitate that, Mufti?
Exactly. I agree with you, but do you not feel this ties into the argument that masjids by and large today are just dysfunctional anyway? I mean, maybe in the UK, in the US, I think masjids are a lot better developed.
Yeah, so in our masjid, we actually have, alhamdulillah, like we're totally integrated in society. So we have interfaith events, we have segments where we dedicate to the food bank, like you name it, what the churches maybe in the UK may be doing.
Yeah.
A general masjid in the US does. to be honest.
I'm definitely. I mean, the imams are much better spoken in the US. They're much more articulate. The lives by and large Muslims are much more, because they're kind of spaced out. They're much more integrated. The other thing is the Muslims in the US, they already come from the migrant parents that moved over were already educated and city folks, whereas in the UK the migrant parents that came here were very rural. Uh, so they were very rural, and you know, they came from villages, they farmers. They weren't people that
But
were
yeah,
educated.
now you guys are the next generation.
Of
So
course,
why
of
is this
course.
still happening? Like, for example, your generation or generation, like my generation there in the UK, people in their 30s or people in their 20s, they're not people now who are like imported from the gowns, you know? Why is the situation still like that in the UK? Or did they
Because
just
it's,
continue
you know,
on with
it's
that
so,
mentality?
what's happened is it's so deep rooted and deep seated that it's going to take a while. But I do see another problem I see is a huge divergence in the kind of the Muslim, the kind of the Muslims here generally. You're getting certain people going in a certain direction. You're getting certain people who are becoming much more dogmatic and staunch than their parents were. Or the people back in the villages, they're becoming worse than them. We've got
Some
like,
people just, or the third segment, which are just saying, let's just leave this whole BS and we
yeah,
can't tolerate
exactly.
it
And then
anymore. Yeah.
you've got a whole segment of people, not even a segment, it's a huge kind of a channel of people that are, saying, forget this religion. The religion is nonsense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just so much, it's so polarized. May Allah make things easy.
I mean,
It's been quite. We've gone on quite a while here. People, there've been quite a few people tuned in. Quite a few from the States who are probably awake at this time. Somebody said Mirpur. There is a lot of.
the guys from the States are maybe just watching me to bash me later, but I don't care, like you said.
Don't worry about it. It's all good, Sheikh. It's all good. Yeah, now they're gonna get a screenshot of this, me doing the devil sign.
And me
with
sitting
you.
there with my topi.
By the way, just so all our viewers know, Sheikh Maz isn't actually dressed in purple. It's the way
Yeah.
his camera has picked him up. It's actually black. He's got a black hat and a black thobe, but it's the way the camera, it must be.
Shukran for clarifying.
Yeah,
Really
so he's
appreciate
not
it.
actually the purple imam. Some people kept referring to you as the purple imam. They're speaking some amazing things about you, by the way. But yeah, so just so people know that. Cool. I think this has been really awesome. I really, first of all, Sheikh, I'm so glad you've come on live. I'm so glad
Pleasure any day. Barakallah feek.
you've really been confident in expressing your opinions about Islam, about the general status quo in the States, in Canada, the Madaris system, the learning, the masjid's functionality, where it's going, whether there's optimism, your own struggles, just clarifying some unfortunate dogmatism that is present, just having the courage to really speak about it. So I really appreciate that. Shukran. Some people are saying, look, come on, Mufti, he was dressed in purple. I thought the Zalame.
It's not, man. It's black. Oh, see, now it's black.
It still looks purple, even if you.
Oh, man.
There goes the Zalame. Syrian slang. Shlonak. Shlonak.
I hope that's not my wife, by the way.
Say that. See, that's why Shaykh was very clear on disowning polygamy straight away from the offset, because he knew his wife might be.
I was actually at a religious scholarly conference. It's initiated by AMJA, which is a local, sort of, once again, non-denominational sort of institute, which focuses on fiqh and fatawa. So one of the scholars there who was presenting, his wife was present on the sister's side. And the sister's side in UK is totally different than the sister's side in the US. The sister side in the UK is a closet. The sister
So
side in
so I've heard.
yeah. So he actually, from the get-go, when the question was about polygamy, he said, "أنا خلاف التعدد يا زوجتي." He pointed at his wife, and yeah. Well, khair, inshallah.
Well, Sheikh, it's been an absolute pleasure. People
Afiq
who've
Mufti.
tuned in, this is a show that is meant to go on. I mean, we're gonna try and do it as much as we can. It's called Mindtrap, and you can understand from that whatever you like. That's the whole purpose about engaging the mind. I do want to get many people on here, diverse people. If you do have any kind of thoughts on who I should get, do kind of hit me up, inshallah. Send me a message. I'll definitely. Likewise, Imam Mazhar is on. Sheikh Mazhar is on Facebook. He is on. Are you on Instagram as well?
Yeah.
He's on Instagram as well. What's your handles and your Facebook and the Insta? Do you know what it is?
Imam Mazhar Mahmood and Mazhar Mahmood 89.
So okay, so that's Imam Mazhar Mahmood with MEH, I believe, isn't it? Or MAH?
MAH.
MAH. MOOD. And it's on Insta, it's Mazhar Mahmood, once again, 89. It's not 69, that's 89. Just in case. Right, Sheikh, absolutely love you for coming on, man. Take very good care of yourself. People, likewise, inshallah. We'll stay tuned. Do subscribe, people. Subscribe, god damn it, subscribe. Right, over and out. Much love, people. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala.